Deuteronomy 4:37 through 40. Because he loved your fathers, therefore he chose their descendants after them, and he brought you out of Egypt with his presence, with his mighty power, driving out from before you nations greater and mightier than you. To bring you in, to give you their land as inheritance. As it is this day, therefore, know this day and consider it in your heart, as the Lord himself is God in heaven, above and all the earth beneath. There is no other. You shall therefore keep his statutes and his commandments, which I commanded you today, that may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time.
Amen. Thank you very much. Our sermon this morning is entitled, Keeping My Commandments. Pastor?
I gotta ask the question. Can you guys hear me? There we go. Wrong. I gotta ask the question. This may be a war of attrition. How many are keeping up with their Bible reading of in the Word? Anybody willing to say that we slipped up a little bit, maybe in Leviticus and Numbers? A couple days. That's okay. Okay. There is a built-in break for us that we're going to catch up. Okay, in June, in July, and August. So don't try to catch up now. It's too grueling. Just keep moving forward. We'll catch up in a little bit later from right now. We've come actually a pretty far way, and I think it's really helpful to remember that our mission statement as a church has already been talked about significantly in our journey through the first 4, now 5 books of the Bible. In understanding what it means to be grounded in understanding that God has provided for us in every single way. It's coming in and out. Okay. It's like I'm underwater. There we go. We have this idea, okay, that God has saved his people. He's brought them out of the land of Egypt, and this is kind of where we're grounded in the fact that he is everything to us. He is who he will be, as he said to Moses, and he's going to be everything actually for us and provide for every way, but we still have to follow him. That's part of the process here. God saves his people through the book of Exodus and brings them to a place where Moses goes up on the side of the mountain, and God shoots off some fireworks up there. There's a storm, and everybody freaks out thinking, oh my goodness, God killed Moses. He's this crazy God, okay? And we're terrified of him. Moses, you go up there. And when he comes down with the 10 Commandments, okay, he sees his people have really, really messed up. They've gone astray, and they've made a golden calf, and they even call it after a god that led us out of the land of Egypt. It calls it Elohim, the gods that led us out of the land of Egypt. So they're replacing that god with a golden calf, because it's a lot more comfortable to have something in front of you than that God. But here's the amazing part of the story is that same God on top of the mountain came down the mountain and he had his people build him a home so he could live among them. And that is the story that we get actually in Leviticus. And if I can summarize it like this, is that I had a young man who lives right next to our Elum-Ellensburg church. He'd never really been to church before, never read the Bible, and he said, I want to do that with y'all. But he texted me this week and he said, why is there so many rules and regulations in Leviticus? He says, I got bogged down. Some of you shaking your head. Me too. Let me summarize it like this. Leviticus and this whole idea that God has built his tabernacle, he's made a way, not for us to always be constantly going up the mountain. He's made a way for us to be in proximity with him again. Okay? To be close with him again, and as we'll talk about at the end of this, to walk with him, step in life again. Okay? And that can be kind of intimidating because we see all these laws, and sometimes it feels like, oh gosh, if I mess up, and if I go into his presence, he's going to kill me, and that is present in Leviticus, and that can kind of freak us out. You know what I'm talking about? Someone illustrated it like this. Don't say this out loud. How do you take a shower? How do you take a shower? Now I'm saying, okay, I'm asking for a question I just said, don't say out loud. Do you clean yourself before you go in the shower? You go in absolutely filthy, okay? You get into the shower absolutely. Now, what is one thing you should probably do before you get in the shower? Take your clothes off. Thank you, Paul. Yes, you need to take your clothes off, okay? This is the concept, okay, of bringing this whole atonement thing. This is being opened up or revealing ourselves being naked with God, okay? Revealing ourselves. In other words, this is where I'm at, God. I'm bringing my sin that I'm actually aware of, and I'm bringing it to you. And guess what? You are going to clean me. Does that make sense? It's this concept through Leviticus, and sometimes it's really hard to get through. And then we get to the point, thank you, Cheryl, for bringing up last week, in Numbers, a people on the move. And God brought his people from this all the way toward the promised land, where he gives them more rules were given to help them survive in the wilderness. Some of them ended there. Many remained. I'm quoting her now, by the way. Principles that would bless them. And for my part, that blessing actually means a lot of things. It means a lot of things. Okay. Before we begin, let me ask a question. And I need to see where we're at. Who believes that keeping the law will not save me? Almost half of us. We'll get there. We'll get there. Only because you've, yeah, that's right. We've already struggled with it. That being said, we're going to discover today and keep on moving forward. We're getting into, we've been grounded in Christ. We're going to grow in him and realize why he set certain laws up. It's super important to understand why, and that's how we actually grow in him and actually know him. While it may not save you, his laws may not save you, it will bring you life. It will. The book of Deuteronomy, the last book of the Torah, and we are here ending our In the Word journey, and we're just beginning it in our reading, but we're ending it here in the last time we're speaking on it. It literally means in Greek, the second law, okay? The second time the law, because what has happened is that Moses brought his people through the land of wilderness. He's really old by now. There's a whole new generation coming up, and they haven't heard it before, and guess what? They should probably know it. They should probably understand why God is doing what he's doing, and so he's retelling of the law and kind of altering it in order for people, not altering it, he's adjusting it so that people can understand why it was made and why it's there. And that's why I chose these particular verses, because it actually gives a little bit of an illustration of how far we've come in our journey. And if you're keeping up with your reading, even if you're not, but if you're trying, keep going. Congratulations. We're doing this together. This is our own journey, and the promised land is right around the corner, I promise. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 37 through 40, as Lorinda just read for us. He says, "And because he loved your fathers and chose their offspring after them and brought you out of Egypt with his own presence, by his great power, driving out before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in, to give you their land for an inheritance. As it is on this day, know therefore today and lay it on your heart that the Lord is God in heaven, above and below the earth beneath, and there is no other. Therefore, you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I commanded you today, that it may go with you and with your children after you, and it may give you life, okay, prolong your days in the land the Lord God has given to you for all of time. Now, we consistently hear this over and over. In fact, one of the most famous prayers, it is the most famous prayer in the Torah. It's called the Shema. We're gonna go over that in just a second, but it's this idea of loving the Lord your God and putting him supremely first. Loving is not just an emotional thing. It is a thing that I follow him with my entire life because I believe him and I trust him, okay? Now, I don't agree with everything this man said, but he was amazing in some regards. A.W. Tozer says this. He says, the cause of all of our human miseries is a radical moral dislocation. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? One more time. The cause of our miseries in our human life is a radical moral dislocation. I worked in the ER for a year, and I could handle anything that came in that door. It didn't matter. We had a guy with a boat prop stuck in him, fishing lines, you name it. I was up in Alaska, so you know what came through there. Wolverine attack, I wasn't there for that one, but just thought I'd throw it in. I can handle blood. I can handle just about anything except one thing, and that's actually dislocations. I don't know why it makes my stomach turn. And I remember this young man comes in, and he's got his shoulder out of his socket, and his shoulder's just hanging there. And I'm like, I got to step back. Someone else has got to take the place. I don't know why it gets me right in the... Some people, it's like blood, but for me, it was dislocations. And I remember this thing of like, until that thing was put back in its right spot, it was going to be absolutely useless and cause him a ton of pain. And so the doctor hung it was like a 5-gallon bucket full of weight, and he hung it on there, and the shoulder like popped back in, and I was like, okay, I'm going to lose my lunch. But it started working again because it was back in the place that it should have been. Are we together? Okay, and if it stayed there, it was going to be completely useless. It was going to die off. This is the whole concept of what God's law is trying to bring to us, okay? He's trying to bring us into life. He's saying there is death out there, and there is life here, and these are the guardrails around it. Don't go out there because it's death. It's going to hurt you. It's going to kill you. You need to stay here because I am actually life. Does that make sense? If you go against the laws I'm giving you, you are going to become dislocated. Your moral joints will be dislocated. You'll be in pain, not just individually, but as a whole, and you'll be very weak, and you'll start to die off. This week, our small group talked about the fact that we live in a society that believes a specific lie, that if we feel something, it must be true. And this causes all sorts of problems. And this continually, it can start with just a few people, and it spreads like pollution, which is a good way of thinking of uncleanliness in the Old Testament. And it can spread like pollution through people. This is why he's saying, be very careful with this. One of the, a couple of the quotes here from the book that was significantly helpful. It says, if you can, in our current culture, if you can make it a trend or popular, you can make it true in our culture. You hear that? If you make it a trend, whatever's trendy, it just becomes truth to us. Modern psychology is actually finding that behaviors and beliefs are contagious, just like if you sneeze and you have a cold and you sneeze on somebody and they catch it and then the next person catches it. Beliefs, behaviors, all this whole thing is actually super contagious. And it functions just like a virus. This was the second quote. I hope this is helpful for us. It says, the old moral absolutes have now been called into question in our current culture he's talking about. And the new authority is, as we explored earlier, the authentic self, defined as desire and feelings. And as a result, we've completely lost our sense of direction other than our own emotional rudders, which all too frequently lead us astray. You hear that? If all we have to do is look inside of ourselves and figure out inside of ourselves what is it that's actually true, you cannot go in the right direction. It's impossible because you'll be like a wave tossed in the sea. You'll be chasing after one thing in one moment and another thing in another moment. And what God is saying, he's like, look, I'm trying to help you from that. I don't want you to be doing that. I want you to be chasing your tail through life. I want to actually give you your deepest desires, and that's why I've given you the law to guard you. Sometimes we get hyper-focused on our culture, and we think that this is only happening in our culture. But this is not a new story. This has happened throughout history. One of the things that keeps coming up to my mind that absolutely blows my mind is look at World War II. Look at this. How did that even happen? How was there millions of Jews killed? How did that even happen? And a whole country, multiple countries, actually get behind this. It's kind of crazy, right? Not kind of. Yes, some people, and by the way, many of the of our Seventh-day Adventist brothers and sisters were part of the movement that were actually along with Hitler. Do you know that? How does that happen? When something becomes normal or when it becomes a trend, people start to feel okay with it, and we lose our sense of what true north is. Okay? Our true north, where our compass is. They did the same thing in slavery. Okay, yep, slavery in our country. You're right. And what we need, and here's the crazy part about it, is anymore, it used to be like person to person, and you would have this like cultural movements of location. And anymore, all you need is one person to agree with you. Anymore, right? Have you noticed this? We call this confirmation bias. That means that I can be wrong. If I just find one person out there that agrees with me, guess what? I can feel like I'm more right again. And once you start down that path, be very careful. Once you start the confirmation bias, and we live in a day and age where you don't have to just look for somebody that lives around you. You can go on the internet, and guess what? There's going to be somebody that believes something that's as weird as what you're trying to promote, and you can find it out there. And this is why it's super important. He says, seek me with all your heart, because if you're seeking after something else, you're going to find it. Understand? Seek me with all your heart, he says. And the scary thing is once we fix our compass so that it's not true north anymore, once we fix it to pointing south or west or some other direction, there's actually no way back. There's no way to actually find your true north unless, where is it? You get another compass. Okay? We need a new compass if we've gone that far. And this is what he's trying to do, is actually help us to walk the way towards him and towards life and keep out of death. So I talked a little bit about the prayer. It's called the Shema, very popular. It's what the Jews play. There's one God and only God, and you should love him with all your heart. There's this term that we use to say, keep his commandments. This term can also mean guard, protect, watch over. And it indicates a level of responsibility. Do you know where this command is actually first from? Anybody? It's not from his commandments, by the way. It's from somewhere else. Eden. Yes, that's exactly it. He's actually like, you're in charge. You're supposed to keep watch. You're guarding, and you're caring for this place. And what happened? He gave it up, and he lost it. Okay, so my Hebrew teacher significantly helped me with this. He says that command actually needs to resonate when we read the 10 Commandments, and the reality is if we do not keep them, if we don't love them and care for them and watch over it, this doesn't mean beat other people over the head with it, okay? If we don't do this ourselves, the same thing that happened to Eden is actually going to happen again, because there's a snake out there, and he wants to remove life from you. Okay? And if you do not guard and keep this thing that leads to life, that points you toward it, points you back towards me, you're going to lose it. And you're going to end up outside the gates once again. This is the whole premise of having, if anybody sees the tabernacle, there's a fire in front of it, there's 2 cherubim, there's 2 angels, and there's a doorway. Anybody know what that points to? Think further back. We just talked about it. It points back to what God has guarding the Garden of Eden. And he's like, if you want to come back this way, okay, there needs to be some sort of repair to our relationship. Sometimes we've read the law as if God wants to punish us too if we don't obey it. And there is an element of that. But I think the greater punishment is already implied in giving the law. It's just going to happen naturally, quote unquote, if we go against it. And the problem with this is that when we have this frame of mind that God's going to punish me and we go against it, what happens? Right? Immediately, what happens? No, nothing. Nothing generally happens. You can, whatever we want to do. We can make a false image. We can lie. We can murder. We can do whatever in specific ways, and nothing happens at first. It's almost kind of like back in the garden. Nothing happens at first, but look at the trajectory of their life and what it actually brought down the road. Misery and death. They did feel immediate separation. Thank you for that. Yep. Yeah, there's an insecurity there. All of a sudden, oh, yeah, we're missing something. You're right. But as far as a direct, you guys get it. I don't need to explain it. There's I think it's okay to get upset when we love something and it's continuing to go in the wrong direction. I think I've shared this before, but it's disgusting enough that I hope it sticks. When we first got our dogs, one of our dogs has a problem with eating his own excrement. And the real problem with that is that he was incredibly sick. And the problem with that is the thing that he was pooping out was the very thing making him sick. And so what he did before he was potty trained, what he would do, instead of returning to his own vomit like dogs do, he returned to his other stuff. And he would continually reinfect himself over and over again. And I remember crying myself to sleep a couple nights just thinking, I'm going to wake up to a dead puppy. I'm going to wake up to this little thing, and he's going to be dead in his cage. And I would get so mad at him. I would get so frustrated at this little dog because I'm like, I know you can't see what you're doing. I know, but stop, please stop this. I remember the day he stopped. And I remember I was in the other room. I was working on my computer, and I remember sitting there, and all of a sudden I felt something hit my leg, and there's my little puppy, and he sits between my leg, and he looks up at me, and I go, no, he did it again. And I went out there and looked, and he didn't. He came to Papa. Okay? Makes sense? He comes to Papa because he realizes I don't actually have my own self-control to control myself around. It's such a bizarre thought to me, to all of us, right? But it's this whole idea that we keep on reinfecting ourselves, and what he wants you to do is actually come back to me, come back into proximity with me, because what we're doing is continually killing ourselves, and it's hurting ourselves all over again, over and over again. And if we keep this route going, it is going to destroy us. That's what's beautiful. Okay, so he actually wants life for us, and the kids in here this morning, we're talking about the fruit of something. What was it, Donovan and Lorinda? Where did they go? What was the fruit about, Lorinda? The fruit you guys were talking about. You talking about leaven, remember? This morning in your Sabbath school class. But it talked about fruit. Do you remember what about? What's that? Mustard seeds? Okay, well, okay. I'll help us out for a moment. Okay. I actually didn't stay for that part, so maybe this is a problem. But we talked about the fruit of the Spirit, which is? Okay, that's our most extensive one, but there's other lists of this. And do you know what he says right after this? Do you know what Paul says right after he lists the fruit of the Spirit? Against these things, there's no such thing as a law, okay? So the law is actually, what's the whole point of the law in the first place? To lead to those things which develop your character. By the way, I was listening to one of my favorite professors and he went on a very popular show, and he ended up explaining this fact that the great controversy is over a war of character. And he says if it was a war of power, it would already be over. God would have obliterated sin, and it's not about that. It's over a war of character. And he says this, going back to Paul and the fruit of the Spirit, and that's the whole point of what he gives the law, why we're even here, is to realize that God's character is good, and we need to be in alignment with that. We have to be. It's not the law that's done away with by any means when he says against such things there's no law. It's that you're automatically actually going to follow these rules because you're acting in according to God's will. It will be the pleasure of your heart, the desire of your heart to actually go in his direction because you realize, oh, this is actually life, and I'm starting to love it. This week, my wife and we had a little conversation about food, and she likes eggs in the morning, and I really like eggs in the morning. But what I did is I transferred them for this disgusting smoothie. And at first, it did not taste good. I put spinach and blueberries and lemon juice and broccoli. Dude, I could go on for like 2 minutes, okay, of all the powdered ingredients I got to put in there. But it's only vegetable, and then I put a bunch of, I try to choke it down with some naked fruit drink. You know what I'm talking about? Because it is really bad. It's really bad. At first, it was really bad. And the more I started to drink it, the more my body started reacting to it. And I said, hey, I actually don't mind this, and I feel like I don't have no idea what this is like, but I feel like I've had 2 cups of coffee without having 2 cups of coffee. You know what I'm saying? But then it lasts. And I said, honey, you know what? I know that eggs are delicious, but this morning I'm not going to have eggs. I'm going to have this disgusting thing that's starting to actually taste better. Okay? Our taste buds, like, how often fall off? It's like once a month or something like that, once every 2 months. Or even sooner than that, yeah. But anyway, like, you develop a taste for whatever you put in your mouth. Okay? And once you start doing this with the law of the Lord, even if we've been mistreated by it in the past, when you start to understand it and the lawgiver, you will actually develop a taste for it and you'll start loving it. Isn't that amazing? He has a way of turning this around. But he says this, if we don't guard and protect the law of God, it's easy to devolve into death and destruction and suffering. It will come up several times in Deuteronomy, as well as one of the most famous lines probably in the book of Judges, is that everyone started to do, anybody? Last line of the book of Judges, everyone started to do what? What was right in their own eyes. That's right. They denied, okay, they started to deny what God was actually commanding them to do, and they started down this road. I want to stop for a second and help us to realize that I think sometimes we focus on the negative things, and we realize that these negative things against God's laws can be contagious, like the feeling that we get, and so can the positive, by the way. This is how we function. And creating a culture of God's goodness, it can start with one little spark. On that note, I would like us to remember that Jesus reminds us that as it was on the day of Noah, so it shall be what? At the time of my second coming. In that passage, Jesus is talking about everybody being caught off guard because the world has strayed away from him so far that everyone has kind of really made their choice. My buddy and I got the chance to, we find this fun, but we are translating the Bible together. We're doing the whole thing. We're not very far. I've already done a lot of the New Testament because I like Greek. I hate Hebrew because it is there's way too many versions of the word. But so he does the Hebrew, and I do the Greek of the Old Testament called the Septuagint, which is the Bible that Jesus read, by the way. And so I'm translating it, and I'm realizing something is that in Noah's time, we go through Noah's lineage in Genesis chapter 6. And then it makes a statement for the way the world has gone. And everyone was doing evil. In other words, everyone was doing right in their own eyes, right? And Noah was there, and it became a very violent place. It says the earth was corrupt in God's eyes, and it was filled with violence. It's filled with this thing. From the Nephilim, and there's a debate on what those guys actually are, but these mighty men, or these men, sons of God, as some versions call it. And it has been corrupted to the point where there was no return. In other words, it's already spoiled from the inside out. God's just going to clean up the mess and start over. Right? It's already over. And it says this. It says Noah walked with him in a time like that. Did I lose it? There we go. Okay. He walked with him. Who did it just say this about in the previous couple chapters? Remember? Who else walked with God? Enoch, right? And it's this idea is that you're in close proximity. It's not just that, oh, yes, I've made sure I'm checking my list of laws that I've kept. No, it's this proximity thing. It's that I'm with you and you're with me and we're happy together. Does that make sense? I'm so happy and delighted with you, but then I want to take a walk with you. I want to be there next to you. And God is there with me. Noah walked with God. If we fast forward to the end of our book here in Deuteronomy. Now, in the Hebrew culture, sort of in our culture too, we have this idea that the last words of somebody are the most important ones. You save those last words, okay, to give them their final instruction. And just before Moses goes up onto the mountain, he gives the children this warning, and it's the same thing he's been repeating. He says, I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse, and therefore choose life that both thou and thy seed may live. Do you understand? He's like, I want you to live. I want you. Please choose this way, but it's still your choice. Knowing that they're going to rebel and they're going to continue in their way in some regards, he still blesses them, tells them that their enemies will not triumph him. God will be their warrior. He goes up on the mountain and he dies. We have a mission, you guys. Like we said, it's not to beat people over the head with God's law, but it is to live it. There is a day and an age where preaching it would work. We have to live it. And if we do not do that, it will be just like the Garden of Eden. You understand? Life will be removed from us if we do not protect this thing. We have to do it to the point where we realize that God's law is the delight of our life, because there is trouble coming. There is struggle that's going to come, and we have to do it while times are good. And to note that, in 1940, Adolf Hitler, he ordered the gassing of all the mental patients. This was Dr. Bodelswig. I think he's a doctor. He's the person in charge of the medical unit that had the mental patients. And he says this. He says, you can put me into a concentration camp if concentration camp if you want. That is your affair. But as long as I am free, you don't touch a single one of my patients. I cannot change to fit the times or wishes of the Führer. I stand under orders from our Lord Jesus Christ. Isn't that amazing? He stood on that because he was so convinced and he was so on his mission that he could stand against even if he was to be put into one of the concentration camps himself. To guard mental patients, people that are looked down upon in our world as less than normal. And he protected them even at his own life. Amazing. Amazing. He believed God and he trusted him in all of his ways. Let's have a word of prayer and hope and pray that that is us too. Jesus, thank you for this example. Thank you that we can stand up to evil because you have called us by your side to walk step in step with you, hand in hand with you, Lord. And even if the entire world becomes corrupt and follows after you, I pray that we are just like Noah, we're like Enoch, and we're like this doctor who decided to say no to something so evil, Lord. And I just pray that that is our church. Whatever that is, I pray that is our church. I pray that we guard and we keep your commandments because we treasure them close to our heart. We recognize that they do lead to life. While they don't save us, Lord, they do lead to life with you. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for giving them. Help us, Lord, in our weakness. Help us with our unbelief, Lord, because sometimes we just don't trust you with that. We don't trust that your justice and mercy are going to reign in the end. And sometimes we break the law because we don't actually trust that that's what you're going to do. Help us with our unbelief, Jesus. In your name, amen.